single mom saved drunk mafia boss from trouble the next day. He didn't pretend to forget. The rain in Port Aurora, Oregon, was not a drizzle. It was a vertical ocean, a relentless assault of cold Pacific water that turned the harbor into a churning mass of black and gray. Delaney Shore felt the chill seep through her worn jacket, the zipper protesting every inch of its ascent. Her shift at the docklight had ended an hour ago, but closing down the bar alone always took longer. Now, past 2 in the morning, the only sounds were the groaning of the moorings and the angry hiss of the downpour. Her old minivan was parked at the far end of the lot, a dark shape against the glistening asphalt. She fumbled for her keys, her head down, thinking only of her son, Evan, and the warmth of their small apartment. That was when she heard it, a low, human sound, half groan, half curse, nearly swallowed by the storm. She froze. Every instinct, honed by years of single motherhood and bartending in a port town, screamed at her to keep walking. Nothing good happened on these docks after midnight. But the sound came again, weaker this time. Delaney moved toward the water, her sneakers silent on the wet planks, between 2 stacks of rusted crab traps. A section of the pier's decking, a maintenance hatch, was half open. A man was wedged in the gap, his legs dangling into the black water below, his upper body caught on the splintered wood. He was dressed in a suit that cost more than her minivan. Now soaked and ruined, a deep, clean gash split his right eyebrow, leaking a steady stream of dark blood that the rain failed to wash away. He was big, and he reeked of expensive whiskey. Rocco Mariani. Even half drowned and bleeding, he was unmistakable. The man whose name was whispered when cargo went missing, the man who owned the fastest boats and the quietest enforcers on the water. Then, a new sound cut through the rain sirens, not the familiar Port Aurora police, but the dual, unnerving wail of a Port Authority cruiser and the deep thrum of an Interstate Crime Integrity Bureau vehicle, the ICIB, federal. Delaney's blood ran colder than the rain. She looked across the inlet, toward the main shipping channel. A figure stood in the shadow of a loading crane, shielded from the weather. The figure raised a small, bright light, flicked it twice toward the approaching sirens, then vanished. A signal, a hunt, and Rocco Mariani was the quarry, trapped and drunk. Her mind raced. Walk away, go to Evan, this was mafia business, federal business, this was death. But her eyes fell on his face, pale beneath the blood, and the way his hand clutched the broken wood, knuckles white. He was still fighting. Compassion was a liability she could not afford, yet it seized her. In one furious, self-loathing motion, she grabbed him under the arms. "Get up!" she hissed. He was dead weight. She hauled, slipping on the slick wood, her muscles screaming. He groaned, a useless, heavy burden. She dragged him, foot by agonizing foot, back across the lot. The sirens were closer now, echoing off the warehouses. She wrenched open the sliding door of the minivan. The hinges screamed in protest. She shoved him inside, onto the worn carpet of the back seat floor, among discarded juice boxes and a single stray sneaker. He landed with a wet, heavy thud. His shoulder was soaked, and it was not just rain. The fabric of his suit was torn, and blood pulsed from a wound high on his arm. She grabbed the first thing she saw in the chaotic back an old, unused safety harness from Evan's booster seat. With practiced, frantic motions, she folded a clean rag from her glove box, pressed it hard against the wound, and used the tough nylon strap of the harness to cinch it tight, a makeshift tourniquet high on his bicep. He mumbled, his breath a foul cloud of alcohol and seawater. "Shallow birth. 7. The manifests. They're all fake. All fake." He passed out, the car filled with the impossible smell of gasoline, salt, and a $100 bottle of bourbon. She slammed the door, jumped into the driver's seat, and peeled out of the lot just as the blue and red lights flooded the pier she had just left. She drove, hands shaking, not to her home, but to the lighthouse. It was a tall, weather-beaten boarding house perched on the bay, a place for people with more history than money. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor. She parked in the alley, cut the engine, and texted her neighbor, Mrs. Petrov. "Evan okay, had a car problem. Be right up, but need to use the storage room first." A moment later, he's fine. Asleep. Door is unlocked. Delaney half-dragged, half-carried Rocco Mariani's unconscious form. She used the back stairs, the ones that led directly to the damp, musty storage room in the basement. It smelled of mildew, old paint, and forgotten lives. She laid him on a pile of old tarps, his breathing ragged. Her phone vibrated in her pocket, a text from an unknown, blocked number. "Don't save him. He'll pull you under." Her heart hammered against her ribs. She stared at the words, a cold dread washing over her. She deleted the message, her thumb pressing the screen so hard it almost cracked. She retrieved her old trauma kit from her apartment, the one left over from her half-finished nursing degree. The gash on his eyebrow was deep, jagged. It needed stitches. She cleaned it with antiseptic, the strong smell sharp in the small room. As the sterile needle bit into his skin for the first stitch, his hand shot out like a striking snake. He grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron, crushing. His eyes were open, not drunk, not dazed. They were sharp, assessing, and cold as the harbor water. The facade of the drunken victim was gone, replaced by the predator she had heard whispers about. "Who hired you?" His voice was a low rasp, gravel and steel, with almost no trace of the liquor left. Delaney's breath caught, but she did not pull away. She met his gaze, her own fear momentarily eclipsed by a surge of defiance. "Nobody," she said, her voice tight. "I just hate watching people drown." His eyes held hers for a long, unblinking moment. The intensity in them was terrifying. Then, as if a string had been cut, the focus bled away. His grip slackened. His hand fell to his side, and his eyes rolled back. He was unconscious again. Truly this time. Delaney let out a breath she did not know she was holding, her wrist throbbing. She finished the last 3 stitches with trembling fingers. Then she acted. She went through his pockets. She took his heavy leather wallet and the keys to a car she had not seen, and hid them in an old coffee can on a high shelf. She pulled out her phone, turned on the camera, and took 2 clear, bright photos of his face, the stitched-up eyebrow, and the bloody, makeshift bandage on his shoulder. Insurance. Through the single, high window of the storage room, she heard it. The distinct, high-pitched whine of a speedboat engine, running without lights, cutting a fast, searching pattern across the bay. The hunt was still on. She locked the storage room door from the outside, the old brass key feeling cold in her palm. She climbed the stairs to her apartment, the silence of the sleeping house, a stark contrast to the chaos in her basement. She checked on Evan, his small form a peaceful lump under his covers. She promised herself, staring out at the dark, churning water, that by morning, Rocco Mariani would be gone. He would be someone else's problem, or he would be gone entirely. She would make him disappear from her life. And she would never, ever tell her son. The dawn in Port Aurora was not a color, but a dilution, a slow, blue-gray wash that bled the black from the sky, revealing the damp, tired edges of the world. Inside apartment, 3B of the lighthouse, the smell of cheap, strong coffee and frozen waffles fought against the persistent scent of mildew. Delaney was already dressed, her hand steady as she poured syrup for her son. "Mom," Evan said, his voice thick with sleep, his 9-year-old face serious. "I heard noises from the basement." Delaney's heart gave a single, hard jolt. She turned, forcing a casual smile. "Oh," she said, placing the plate in front of him. "It was probably just Mrs. Petrov's fat calico again. That thing gets stuck everywhere." "It sounded bigger than a cat," he mumbled, already digging into the waffle. "Eat up. The bus will be here in 20 minutes. She'd been down to the storage room at 5, just as the first light touched the water. The room was empty. The tarps were folded. The only sign he had been there was the faint, lingering smell of antiseptic and the key she had used, now sitting on the floor just inside the door. She walked into her tiny kitchen, and her breath hitched. Rocco Mariani was standing at her sink, his back to her. He was wearing an old, stretched-out gray t-shirt of hers, one she used for painting, and a pair of dark trousers that were still damp but impossibly well pressed. The shirt was tight across his broad shoulders and back. He was washing the dishes she had left in the sink the night before, his movements economical and precise. The wound on his arm was gone, presumably hidden by the sleeve of his suit jacket, which was now slung over the back of a chair, looking almost dry. He placed the last coffee mug in the drainer and turned, drying his hands on a dish rag. His face was clean. The cut above his eye, a stark, angry red line held together by her own clumsy, black stitches. His eyes were clear, intelligent, and utterly sober. There was no trace of the drunken wreck from the pier, nor the cold predator from the basement. This was a third version, one she was not prepared for. He gestured to the small kitchen counter. Her coffee can was there, right where she had left it. Next to it was her phone. "I put your wallet back in the can," he said, his voice a low, even baritone. Nothing like last night's rasp. "You can keep the pictures of the wound if it makes you feel more secure." He knew. He knew she had searched him, knew she had photographed him for leverage. He was not pretending to forget a single moment. Delaney crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe, creating a physical barrier between him and the living room where her son was eating. "I want you to leave." "I am," he said. He reached into his trouser pocket, but she cut him off. "No," she said, her voice sharp. I don't want your money. I don't want payment for the stitches or anything. I just want you to walk out that door, and I want this port to be quiet again." His gaze moved past her, to the wall of the kitchen, where a long strip of paint was peeling away from the damp drywall. "You wanted to be a nurse," he stated. It was not a question. She stiffened. "How?" "You have a third-year pharmacology textbook in the storage room," he said simply, "and a box of expired IV kits. You're good at it. Your stitches are tight, if a little angry." "Dreams cost money," Delaney said flatly, "and they're not worth what people like you charge for them. Get out." He nodded slowly, a small, unreadable motion. His eyes flicked toward the living room, toward the sound of the small television she always put on for Evan in the morning. "The boy," he said, "your son. I apologize for alarming your home. May I thank him properly before I go?" The request was so polite, so civilized. It was more terrifying than a threat. Delaney's blood turned to ice. She pushed off the doorframe, taking one small step toward him. Her voice was low, absolutely rigid. "No, you will never meet my son. You will not look at him. You will not speak his name. This," she gestured between them, "does not happen. We are not friends. This isn't a story. You are not coming back here. This is the boundary. Family is off limits." Rocco held her gaze. The air in the tiny kitchen felt thin, charged with the unspoken violence he represented. He seemed to weigh her, her words, her fear. Finally, he gave another slow nod. "Understood." On the small television in the next room, the local news anchor's voice suddenly sharpened. "Breaking news this morning from the Port Aurora industrial area. A massive fire, believed to be an explosion, has destroyed a container warehouse belonging to the Greymar Transport. Group officials are investigating, but sources mention the possibility of foul play." Delaney watched Rocco's face. His expression didn't change, but a muscle in his jaw tightened, and the color drained from his face, leaving the stitches looking even darker. "They're framing me," he said, the words almost a whisper, directed at the wall, at the news, at the world that was closing in on him. He turned back to her. The controlled, calm man was gone, replaced by a sudden, cold urgency. He pulled a single, stark white business card from his pocket. It was thick, expensive cardstock, but completely blank. No name, no logo. He flipped it over. A 10-digit number was handwritten on the back in black ink. "If anyone asks, you say you have never seen me," and he commanded, his voice returning to the steel she remembered. "If they ask about the noise, it was the cat. If they ask about the blood, you cut yourself. And you and your son stay away from Shallow Berth 7. Do you understand me?" "Just go," she said, exhausted. He moved toward the door, then paused. His hand on the knob, he looked back at her, his eyes unreadable. "You saved my life. Delaney Shore. That's not something I forget." He opened the door, stepped into the gray morning light of the hallway, and was gone. The only sound was the click of the latch. Delaney stood in the kitchen for a full minute, her heart pounding a heavy, sick rhythm. Then she went to the sink and scrubbed her hands until they were raw, trying to wash off the phantom feeling of his presence, the smell of his expensive, dangerous world. She felt a wave of profound relief, a tension releasing from her shoulders she had not known she was carrying. It was over. He was gone. She finished cleaning, kissed Evan goodbye at the bus stop, and walked back toward the lighthouse, pulling her thin jacket tight. The day was just a day. Normal. As she approached the front porch, she glanced up at the cheap plastic security camera she had installed 2 years ago, the one that gave her a grainy, unreliable feed of the front step. It was pointing in a different direction, not at the steps, where it always pointed, but angled slightly down the street, toward the alley, toward the way she had parked the minivan last night. Someone had moved it. Someone who was not her. The relief vanished, replaced by a cold, heavy dread that settled low in her stomach. He was gone, but his world was not. The feeling of being watched, of being seen by unseen eyes, descended on her like the harbor fog. The afternoon shift at the docklight was a slow grind of polishing glasses and wiping down the scarred mahogany bar. The place smelled of stale beer and the fried fish special, a scent Delaney usually found comforting, a sign of her own gritty survival. Today, it smelled like a trap. Her body was strung tight, every nerve anticipating the sound of a door opening. Around 4 o'clock, they came in, 2 men, not the usual dock workers or fishermen. They wore cheap suits that tried too hard, and their eyes were clear and sober, ominously sober. They sat at the far end of the bar, away from the other 2 patrons, and ordered soda water with lime. They did not touch their drinks. Delaney moved to wipe the bar near them, her senses on high alert. "I heard there was some trouble last night," one of them said, his voice casual, but his eyes scanning every corner of the room, down by the piers. "Always trouble by the piers," Delaney replied, her voice flat, her eyes on the rag in her hand. "We're looking for someone," the other one picked up, his voice smoother. "A guy in a good suit, maybe took a fall, limping. You see anyone like that?" Delaney looked up, meeting his gaze with a practiced, weary indifference. It was raining buckets. Everyone looked like they took a fall. "Can I get you anything else?" The men stared at her for a long beat. The first one dropped a $20 bill on the bar for 2 $4 drinks. "Keep the change. We'll ask around." They left. Delaney watched them climb into a dark gray sedan, and she committed the license plate to memory, repeating the numbers in her head. "Tough crowd, huh?" Delaney, startled. Mr. Latham, the bar's new owner, had come up beside her. He had bought the docklight 3 weeks ago, a man with a thin, watery smile that never seemed to reach his eyes. "Just thirsty," she said. He leaned in, lowering his voice, his attempt at confidentiality making her skin crawl. "Listen, Delaney, you're a hard worker. I was thinking, I could use some extra help. Eyes and ears. You know I could slip you some cash, overtime, just for letting me know if anyone comes around asking about Rocco Mariani." The name, spoken aloud in her workplace, felt like a physical blow. The men in the suits had been vague. Latham was specific. "I don't know who that is," she said, her voice turning to ice. Latham's smile widened, a grimace. "Of course not. Just keep up the good work." He patted her arm, a gesture she felt as a violation. She knew, with cold certainty, that her bar was no longer safe. She clocked out, claiming a migraine, and drove the minivan to Evan's school. The gymnasium was a riot of noise, smelling of floor wax, glue, and excited children. The tension in her shoulders eased just a fraction. This was her real world. Evan saw her and his face lit up, a pure, blinding beam of joy. He dragged her by the hand to his table. "Mom, look, I finished it." His project was a shoebox, covered in tinfoil, with a small bicycle light inside a red plastic cup, a sign, written in his best 9-year-old cursive, read, "The Shore Light, a Fog Warning System." He flipped a switch, and the red light began to blink, slow and steady. "It's for the ships, Mom," he explained, his voice filled with an earnest, serious passion. "When the fog is thick, they can't see the rocks. My light tells them where the shore is, so they don't crash. It helps them stay safe." Delaney's breath hitched. She pulled him into a hug, burying her face in his hair, which smelled of pencil shavings. "It's perfect, Ev. It's the best project here." He wanted to help ships not crash, while she was doing everything in her power to keep one very specific man from sinking and taking her with him. She listened to 20 minutes of explanations about bean sprouts and baking soda volcanoes, but a cold spot was drilling into her back. Through the wired glass windows of the gym's double doors, across the street, a black Lincoln Navigator was parked. Its windows were tinted, so dark they looked like polished obsidian. It had not been there when she arrived. It did not move for the entire hour she was there. No one got in. No one got out. It just sat, watching. Her blood ran cold. This was not Latham's petty spying. This was real. She walked Evan to his bus, her smile bright and brittle, her skin screaming with the feeling of being watched. The SUV remained. As the bus pulled away, she ducked behind a parked car, her hands shaking so hard she could barely grip her phone. She pulled out the blank, white business card. She dialed the 10-digit number. It was the first time. The call connected on the second ring. No greeting. "Hello," Delaney whispered. "Who is this?" The voice was female, crisp, and held zero tolerance for nonsense. "My name is Delaney. Rocco. He gave me this number. There's a black SUV outside my son's school. It's been watching us." A beat of silence. Black Navigator. Oregon plates. "Yes." A sharp sigh. "ICIB. They're making a point. They're connecting you to him. They're working with Graymar Transport, trying to pin last night's explosion on him so they can seize his shipping lanes." "The men at the bar, Latham?" Delaney murmured, connecting the dots. "Latham's a rat. The ICIB are clumsy. You're in it. Delaney, pack a bag, get your son, get in your car, and drive east. Don't stop until you're in Idaho." The advice was sound. It was the sane, safe thing to do. It was also impossible. "No," Delaney said, her voice shaking but finding a new, hard edge. "This is my home. I am not running from my home." The woman on the phone was silent for a long moment. "Sarah Vale," she said finally. "That's my name. The SUV will leave. They've made their point. But they'll be back. You chose the hard road, Delaney." The line went dead. As if on command, the black SUV's engine started, and it pulled smoothly into traffic, disappearing. When Delaney got back to the lighthouse, an envelope was sticking out of her mail slot. It was heavy. Cream-colored cardstock. Evan's name was printed on the front. She tore it open. Inside, she found 2 tickets for the Port Aurora Pilots, the local baseball team. Tucked behind them was a single, folded piece of white paper. It was blank, except for a small, hand-drawn nautical symbol in the center, a circle with a cross inside, a wreck, or a dangerous shoal. Delaney knew the chart symbol. It marked the most treacherous, unlit part of the industrial harbor. Shallow Berth 7. Rocco's words from the pier, thick with whiskey and seawater, echoed in her head. It was a warning from him, and a map from someone else. She waited until sunset, until Mrs. Petrov had Evan safely in her apartment for a movie night, Delaney dressed in her darkest jeans and the black hoodie she wore for work. She did not take the minivan. She walked, sticking to the shadows. The berth was at the far, forgotten end of the Graymar yard. The fence was high, but the lock on the gate was a joke. She slipped inside. Rows of containers stood like steel canyons. She found row 7. These containers were different, white with red crosses painted on the side. Humanitarian aid medical equipment, read the stenciled lettering. The seals, however, were just cheap plastic, not the heavy-duty federal bolts. She used her house key to pry one open. It snapped easily. She aimed her phone's small flashlight inside. It was not a hospital bed. It was not medicine. The container was filled with long, wooden crates. She wedged her fingers under a lid and pulled. Inside, nestled in straw, were dozens of sleek, oiled, metallic components. They were not guns, but they were not medical supplies. They were parts, all identical, none of them bearing a single serial number. She took 3 pictures, the flash blindingly bright in the darkness. "That's not a good place to be, sweetheart." Delaney spun, her heart leaping into her throat. 2 men, not the suits, not the ICIB. These were rough, dock workers, and they were blocking the only way out. "Lost your way," one of them sneered, stepping forward. Delaney bolted. She ran, not for the gate, but deeper into the maze. She saw an iron maintenance ladder built into the side of a container stack and scrambled up, her fingers raw on the cold metal. "Grab her?" She reached the top, 20 feet high, a flat, dark roof, a dead end. One of the men was on the ladder, his heavy boot just below her, his hand grasping for her ankle. A low engine, which had been idling nearby, suddenly roared. A small skiff shot out from the black water of the berth below her. "Jump." Delaney looked down. Sarah Vale stood at the console, her face set. Delaney didn't think. She jumped. She hit a pile of fishing nets in the bottom of the boat, the impact jarring her teeth. The man on the ladder shouted, but the skiff was already accelerating, slicing through the water, away from the pier. Delaney gasped for air, pulling herself up. Sarah didn't look at her, her eyes trained on the dark channel ahead. "What were you thinking?" Sarah yelled over the whine of the outboard motor. "He told me to stay away," Delaney yelled back. "Someone else sent me the map." Sarah cut the throttle, letting the boat drift in the relative darkness of the outer channel. She finally turned to face Delaney, her eyes black pits in the gloom. "It doesn't matter," Sarah said, her voice deadly quiet. "You went. You took the pictures. You're in Delaney. You've officially stepped in it. There is no going back." Sarah's skiff dropped her at a rotting pier miles from the Graymar yard, a place where the skeletons of half-finished boats slumped in the mud. The air smelled of low tide, rust, and something metallic, like old pennies. Rocco Mariani was waiting, standing under the skeletal frame of a half-built trawler. He was not the man from the pier, nor the man from her kitchen. This was the third, and perhaps the truest, version. He wore dark, functional trousers and a Henley that did nothing to hide the lean, hard muscle of his torso. He was completely, terrifyingly sober. His eyes, the same ones that had been clouded with liquor and then cold with assessment, were now just clear, focused, and heavy with an exhaustion that matched her own. "Sarah shouldn't have involved you," he said. His voice was quiet, but it carried in the damp air. "She didn't," Delaney countered, stopping a good 10 feet from him. "You did. When you got yourself stuck on that pier." A ghost of a smile touched his mouth, gone as quickly as it came. "I was drugged," he said. It was a flat admission, stripped of ego. At a meeting, someone mixed a beta blocker with the whiskey. Slowed my heart, blurred my vision. I thought I could walk it off, get to my boat. I misjudged. He looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "Thank you for the pictures from the container. That was reckless and more valuable than you know." "I don't want your gratitude," Delaney said, her voice hard. I want a guarantee. This world, your world, it stops at my front door. My son, Evan, he does not get touched by this. He doesn't get seen by it. He doesn't get whispered about. Whatever happens, whatever you are doing, he is not a part of it. He won't be, Rocco said. I gave you my word. Family is off limits. That includes yours. That's the only reason I'm here. Now, what are those things in that container? Components, he said, turning to look out at the water. Untraceable, unserialized. Graymar and the ICIB are using humanitarian aid shipments as a cover to move them. They're building something they're willing to kill for and frame me for. Delaney watched his profile, the hard line of his jaw, the stitches she had put above his eye. You have a shipping empire. You control half the water in this city. Why are you the target? Rocco was silent for a long moment, watching a gull land on a broken pylon. My father was a tugboat captain, he said, his voice dropping, losing its edge, becoming something more personal. He worked 25-hour days for 30 years. He was honest, and one night, he got caught between two rival crews fighting over a stolen shipment. They beat him so badly he never walked again. He died in debt, choked by the fees and the threats. He turned to face her. I built what I built so that no one could ever put a hand on my throat again, so that I could control the chaos. Power isn't safety, Rocco, Delaney warned, the words coming out sharper than she intended. It's just a bigger target. Safety doesn't exist without power, he countered, stepping closer. You and your son. You think you're safe in that little apartment. You think the law protects you. You saw that SUV. You saw Latham. Safety is a myth, they tell people who have nothing. I am just trying to not have nothing. The sky, which had been threatening all day, finally broke. The first drops were fat and heavy, spattering on the tin roof above them like thrown gravel. Within seconds, it was a deluge, a wall of gray water sealing them inside their makeshift shelter. The roar of the rain was deafening, isolating them from the world. The sudden intimacy was suffocating. They stood in the gloom, the smell of the rain mixing with the scent of wet wood and the faint metallic tang of the shipyard. The sound forced a silence, and in that silence, their voices, when they finally spoke, were softer. You're bleeding, Rocco said, his eyes fixed on her arm. Delaney looked down. She must have scraped it on the container ladder. A long, shallow scratch was welling up with dark blood, tracing a line down her forearm. It's nothing, she said, wiping at it. He moved, for the first time, inside her 10-foot boundary. He stopped just short of her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body in the sudden cold. He held up a small, folded gauze packet. He must have pulled it from the first aid kit on his boat. May I? He asked. His voice was low, and the question was real. He was asking for permission, a courtesy she had not expected. She held her breath, then nodded, extending her arm. He did not just grab it, he was careful. His fingers brushed her skin, calloused and warm, sending a jolt through her that had nothing to do with fear. He opened an antiseptic wipe, and his touch was surprisingly gentle as he cleaned the wound. Delaney watched his face. He was focused, his dark eyebrows drawn together, the line of his mouth soft. She could feel his breath, slow and steady, warm against her skin. He wrapped the small gauze pad around the scratch and began to secure it with a roll of tape. His hand, she realized, was not completely steady. There was a fine, almost imperceptible tremor in his fingers as he tried to tear the tape. It was the single most human thing she had seen from him. This man who commanded a fleet, who was at war with federal agents, whose hand, she was certain, had never wavered in violence, was trembling as he taped a bandage to her arm. The hard, impenetrable shell had a crack. He finished, his fingers lingering for just a second too long on her skin. His gaze lifted, met hers. His eyes were dark, and in the dim, rain-filled light, she saw a raw, unguarded intensity that was more dangerous than his anger. It was a look that recognized her, truly saw her, and it made her heart stop. A harsh crackle of static broke the spell. A radio on Rocco's belt hissed to life. "Rocco, you read me." Sarah's voice was tight, all business. Rocco stepped back, breaking the current between them, his face hardening instantly. He tapped the radio. "Go." Latham's rats made a call. "ICIB is staging. They're hitting the docklight, now. They're going to tear it apart, looking for a link to you." Delaney's blood went cold. Her job, her paycheck. Rocco looked at her, his face grim. The moment of softness was gone, shattered. "Sarah," he said into the radio. "Send a team. Clean house. No one talks to anyone." He clicked it off and looked at Delaney. "They'll be looking for you," he said. "They'll connect the woman who patched me up to the woman who works at the bar. Latham will give you up in a second." He stood in front of her, blocking her only exit, a solid, immovable object. "This is your last chance," he said, his voice flat. "If you want to walk away, you do it now. I'll have Sarah get you a car, cash. You and Evan can be in Seattle by morning. You will be safe, and you will never hear my name again." He was offering her the sane choice, the one she had begged for. Delaney looked at the rain, at the man in front of her, at the picture in her mind of Evan's hopeful, earnest face as he explained his fog light. She thought of the black SUV, of Latham's greasy smile, of the untraceable components in the boxes. They would not stop. They would not stop at the docklight. They would find her, sooner or later, and they would use her, or crush her, to get to him. Safety was a myth. He was right. Delaney took a deep breath, the cold, damp air filling her lungs. She met his gaze, and for the first time, her own held no fear, only a cold, hard resolution that matched his. "I choose to protect the truth," she said, her voice clear and strong over the sound of the storm. "And my son. And running won't do either." Rocco watched her, searching her face for any sign of hesitation. He found none. He had offered her an escape, and she had refused it. She had chosen a side. He gave a single, sharp nod. The look in his eyes changed. He was no longer looking at a victim he had to protect or a civilian to manage. He was looking at an equal. "All right," he said. "Then we fight." The harbor was a nest of sleeping giants, but at 3 a.m, one part of it was violently awake. A convoy of 12 refrigerated trucks, all identical, suddenly roared to life at the Graymar main freight entrance. Their horns blared, engines revved, and their headlights flooded the checkpoint, turning night into a blinding, chaotic day. Guards scrambled, shouting, their attention completely fixed on the nonsensical, loud diversion. 2 blocks away, in the pitch-black shadow of a grain silo, Delaney and Sarah Vale slipped through a gap in the fence. Sarah moved like a phantom. Delaney's heart felt like a trapped bird. "Stay with me, sure." Sarah breathed, not a request, but a command. "He's creating the noise. We use the silence." Their target was the Central Port Authority office, a glass and steel box squatting in the middle of the container yard. The lobby was manned by a single, bored-looking night guard. Sarah was about to move on him, her hand slipping to the weighted sap at her belt, but Delaney grabbed her arm. "No," she whispered. "Too loud." She pointed to a stack of visitor packets. "Distract him. The louder, the better." Delaney walked in first, her gait a perfect imitation of a lost, slightly drunk tourist. "Oh, thank God," she gushed, approaching the desk. "I am so lost. I'm supposed to be meeting my boyfriend. He drives one of the big ships." As she babbled, Sarah entered, stomping her feet. "This is a disgrace," Sarah shouted, her voice echoing in the sterile space. "My company's container is stuck in customs, and this idiot," she pointed at the guard, "won't answer his phone." The guard, startled, stood up. "Ma'am, you can't be in here." "I am in here." Sarah slammed her hand on the desk. "I want your supervisor. I want his badge number. I want to know why Graymar is employing incompetent fools." As the guard's attention was fully, angrily engaged by Sarah's performance, Delaney, still lost, leaned against the edge of the desk. With one hand, she deftly palmed a blank, clip-on guest pass from a box. With the other, She fumbled in her pocket, as if looking for a name. She pulled out a small roll of white medical tape. In one smooth, practiced motion, she tore a strip, wrapped it around the blank pass, and pressed it to the underside of the high counter. She repeated the motion, grabbing Sarah's pre-made, high-level fake ID from her own pocket and sticking it right next to the other. "You know what?" Delaney interrupted, her voice trembling. I'll wait outside." Sarah gave the guard one last, disgusted look. Useless. They both walked out. The guard, shaking his head at the crazy women, sat back down, never looking under his desk. In the stairwell, they clipped on the passes. Delaney's hands were shaking. "How did you know he wouldn't look?" "He's a $2 guard," Sarah said, checking the magazine on her pistol. "He's paid to look at what's in front of him, not what's underneath." The server room was on the 4th floor. Sarah bypassed the lock with a thin piece of metal, and they were in. Delaney went straight for the main server stack. Her movements fast. She knew computers. She'd built Evans from spare parts. She had the drive bay open when the world went red. The emergency lights flooded the room, and a deafening, metallic clanging filled the air. "Silent alarm!" Sarah yelled, pulling the heavy drive from its slot. "We're blown!" They burst back into the hallway. Down below, the lobby was filled with men in black tactical gear, marked with the gold and blue emblem of the ICIB West Coast Response Team. "The roof," Sarah commanded. They took the stairs 2 at a time, but the team was already ascending. They were cut off. "This way." Sarah kicked open a maintenance door, leading them onto a gravel-covered utility roof. The rain was back. A cold, stinging mist. Suddenly, the yard below them lit up. A blinding spotlight coming from the gantry of the largest container crane. Rocco, and he was in the cab, a god in the machine, 90 feet up. The ICIB team's vehicles, 3 black SUVs, were racing across the tarmac toward the building. With a groan of powerful hydraulics, Rocco swung the crane arm. A massive 40-foot red container lifted from a stack and swung through the air. He dropped it. The steel box slammed onto the pavement with a sound like a bomb. A perfect, impassable wall blocking the SUV's path. Delaney and Sarah ran for the roof's edge, where a skiff was supposed to be waiting. A man stepped out of the shadows of an HVAC unit. He was in a suit, not tactical gear, and held a pistol casually at his side. "Delaney Shore," he said, his voice oily and calm. "Agent Kellen, I was hoping you'd be here." "Get out of the way," Sarah growled, raising her weapon. Ah, Kellen said, not even looking at her. The civilian. "You're in deep, sweetheart, but it's not too late." He took a step closer. "Money. A new life. We can put you and Evan," that's his name. "Right, Evan, we can put you both in a nice house in Arizona. Safe. All you have to do is tell me where Mariani's real ledger is." Delaney's hand went to the phone in her pocket. Her thumb found the record button she had set up. "I don't know what you're talking about." "He's a criminal. Delaney. He'll drag you and your boy to the bottom. I'm offering you a life raft." "No," she said, her voice clear. The recording was active. Kellen's smile faded. "Wrong answer." He raised his pistol, not at Delaney, but at Sarah. Sarah fired first. The shot was deafening. Kellen dived, his own shot going wild, pinging off a steel vent, a piece of metal shrapnel. White hot, sliced through the air. Sarah cried out, a sharp, choked sound, and grabbed her arm. "Go!" she yelled, firing again toward Kellen's position. "You're hit," Delaney shouted. "It's a scratch go." Delaney dragged the injured woman to the edge. The skiff was directly below. Rocco at the helm, his face a mask of fury. "Jump!" Sarah went first, landing hard. Delaney followed, but as she was in the air, another ICIB agent appeared on the roof, firing down. The skiff's small windscreen exploded into a spider web of 1,000 pieces. Delaney landed, and in the same instant, Rocco was on her, his body covering hers, shielding her from the rain of glass. His weight was a shock, solid and hot, pinning her to the floor of the boat. The engine roared, and the skiff launched into the dark channel, bullets pinging off the fiberglass behind them. For a second, they stayed like that, his body a human shield, the sound of her own blood roaring in her ears. He pushed himself up, his face inches from hers, his eyes were blazing. He was breathing hard. He had protected her. An unsaid, unacted upon flash of heat passed between them, thick with adrenaline and something else. Before he turned back to the wheel, back in the abandoned shipyard, Sarah was pale, bleeding through the fabric of her jacket. "It's fine," she insisted, but her voice was tight. "Sit down," Delaney ordered, her nursing instincts taking over. She cut the sleeve open. The shrapnel had laid open a 3-inch gash on her bicep. Delaney's hands, which had been trembling, were now rock steady. She cleaned it, applied a pressure dressing from Rocco's kit, and bound it tight. Rocco, meanwhile, had the hard drive plugged into a heavy-duty laptop. He was silent. "What is it?" Delaney asked, tying off the bandage. Rocco turned the screen. It was a flowchart, a complex web of shell companies. Graymar shipped the medical supplies, the untraceable components to shell companies inland. Those companies donated them to a series of fake charities, which then liquidated them for cash, reporting the income as donations. A perfect wash. And at the very top of the pyramid, the keystone organization that distributed all the funds was a name that made Delaney feel sick. "The Lighthouse Fund," she whispered, "the mayor's pet project, the charity that sponsored half the events in Port Aurora." Rocco slammed the laptop shut. He looked at Sarah, then at Delaney. "This ends," he said, his voice a low growl. "I'm done with this shadow war. We're going to burn them, but we're going to do it with the light. We publicize the clean side of my books. We give the feds a real target, and we attack Graymar and the ICIB with their own laws." Delaney felt a surge of something she had not felt in years, hope. Her phone vibrated, a text from an unknown number. She opened it. It was a picture. Evan, he was standing outside his school, holding his fog light project, smiling at the camera. He looked so proud. Her hope died, replaced by a suffocating, icy terror. The person holding the camera was close enough to touch him. She was on her feet, choking. Rocco was at her side in an instant. "What is it?" He saw the phone. His face, which had been alive with righteous fury, went dead. She was already moving, grabbing her keys. "I have to get him." "No," Rocco said, his voice now gentle, but firm. "You can't. They're watching you. They're watching him." "What am I supposed to do?" she wept, the tears finally coming, hot and angry. "You take him somewhere they won't look." The drive up the winding hill to the First Hill Chapel was the longest of her life. Pastor Ray, a woman with kind eyes and a spine of steel, met them at the door. She and Delaney had been friends since high school. "He'll be safe here," Ray promised, taking Evan's backpack. Delaney knelt. "Hey, Bug," she said, her voice breaking. It's like a sleepover. Pastor Ray is going to show you the old bell tower, just for a few days." "Are you coming back?" Evan asked, his small face tight with a worry that shattered her heart. She hugged him, her entire body shaking. "I'm always coming back to you," she whispered. A promise she was terrified she could not keep. She left him there, under the stained glass window, and walked back to the car, feeling as if she had just ripped her own heart out and left it on the hill. The shipyard was silent, a graveyard of intentions. The only sound was the persistent rain, a soft drumming on the corrugated tin roof that magnified the quiet inside. Delaney was sitting on an overturned crate, her arms wrapped around herself, but she could not stop the tremors. The image of Evan's smiling face, sent by his predator, was burned into her mind. Rocco stood 10 feet away, near the massive, dark shape of a diesel engine. He was not crowding her. He was simply present, a solid, watchful shadow in the gloom. "He's safe," Rocco said, his voice low, not trying to force comfort, just stating a fact. "Ray is my cousin. Her church is the safest ground in this city. No one will touch him there." "They got to him," she whispered, her voice fracturing. "They got close enough to take a picture. They saw him Because of me. I'm the bridge. I'm the thing that connects their world to my son." He walked over then, his steps slow, deliberate. He stopped, still respecting the space between them, but he was close enough now that she could feel the warmth he radiated. "What they did," he said, and his voice was rough with a self-loathing that startled her, "is not your fault. It's mine. I am the storm. I am the one who washed up on your pier and pulled you into this. The shame in that. It's mine to carry, not yours." Delaney looked up. His face was etched with exhaustion, and something more. Guilt. Real, profound guilt. It was the last thing she expected to see in the eyes of a mafia boss. Her hand moved before she thought about it. She reached out. Not in a gesture of comfort for him, but in a desperate need to connect with something solid. She laid her palm flat against his chest, against the worn cotton of his Henley. Under her hand, his heartbeat was a slow, powerful, steady rhythm, thump, thump, a living anchor in the chaos. She felt the tremors in her own body quiet, just slightly, drawn to that stability. He looked down at her hand, then back to her face. His own hands were at his sides, clenched into fists. He did not move, did not cover her hand with his. He just let her hold on to him. "Delaney," he said, his voice barely a breath, May I hold you?" She had no words left. She just nodded, a small, jerky motion. He did not grab her. He moved with an infinite, heartbreaking gentleness. He stepped in, his arms coming around her, his hands splayed wide on her back. He did not pull her tight. He simply encompassed her. He created a shelter. She let her head fall forward, resting her forehead against his skin warm against hers. She closed her eyes, and for the first time in days, she breathed. Their breath mingled. His hands on her back were just holding, waiting. He was giving her all the control. It was she who finally moved, her arms sliding from his chest to wrap around his waist, pulling herself closer, burying her face against his shoulder. He smelled of rain, old wood, and the faint, clean scent of the mint from the gum he'd been chewing. He held her. He just held her as the last of her adrenaline-fueled strength finally gave way. When she finally pulled back, her face was wet, but she was not shaking anymore. He kept one hand on her arm, steadying her. His gaze was deep, searching. The kiss was an answer to a question neither of them had dared to ask. It was born of that shared, desperate silence. He leaned in slowly, giving her 1,000 years to turn away. She did not. His lips were soft, hesitant. It was not a kiss of passion, at first, but of profound, aching recognition. It was a promise to a survivor. Then she tilted her head, her hand coming up to cup his jaw, the rough stubble grazing her palm, and she kissed him back. It deepened. It was not hurried, but it was hungry. A slow, deep exploration, a desperate claiming of life in the middle of a war. It was the mint, the rain, the taste of salt from her tears, and the unshakable, solid presence of him. Her knees felt weak. He seemed to feel it, his arm tightening around her waist, drawing her flush against him. He guided her backward until the backs of her legs hit a long, wooden workbench. He sat first, pulling her down to sit beside him, breaking the kiss but never the contact. He kept his arm around her, his fingers tracing a light, almost reverent line along her collarbone. "Your stitches," he murmured, a rough, low laugh in his chest. "They're still angry." "You were a terrible patient," she whispered back, her fingers finding the small, faded scar on his chin, a relic of an older fight. They sat in the dim light, the rain their only soundtrack, and the confessions came, not of facts, but of feelings. They spoke of fear more than of clothes. Their eyes stayed locked. A desperate, silent communication. He looked at her, his hand moving from her collarbone to cup her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. His eyes were dark, his resolve absolute. "I am here," he whispered, the words a vow. "Completely. I am not going anywhere." He waited. He watched her. He was asking again. in a new way. And she gave her answer by leaning into his touch, her eyes closing. He kissed her again, and this time there was no hesitation. The slow burn finally caught flame. His hand slid from her face to the nape of her neck, his fingers tangling in her hair, holding her as he deepened the kiss. There was a cascade of sensations, all heightened, all centered on touch and breath. A jacket slithered to the floor. His name was a broken whisper against his mouth. Her back arched as his lips traced a line from her jaw down her throat, a jolt of pure, clean electricity. His touch was not demanding, it was worshipful. His hands tracing the line of her shoulder, her arm, as if memorizing her. Her hands, in turn, clenched in the fabric of his shirt, pulling him closer, as if she could absorb his strength. There was a moment. A sharp intake of breath from both of them, a trembling of her shoulders, a tightening of his grip. They held on to each other, two people in a storm, finding their only anchor. "Don't leave," she breathed, the words lost against his skin. Later, the storm outside had settled, and so had they. They were wrapped in an old coarse wool blanket he had pulled from a storage locker, sitting on the bench, her back pressed against his chest. The rain was a gentle tapping on the roof. He was quiet for a long time, his chin resting on the top of her head. "I will let love be stronger than hate, tonight." She said, his voice a low rumble she felt more than heard. It was a strange, archaic promise, but in this place, from this man, it was the most binding oath he could make. Delaney turned her head. Resting her cheek against his shoulder, she could see the first, faint gray light of morning filtering through the shipyard's grimy windows. "Good," she said, her voice small but clear, tears gathering again, but for a different reason, because tomorrow we start with the truth. The lawyer was a small, sharp woman named Eliza Kahn, who operated out of a cramped office in the next county over. She looked at the flow chart from the hard drive, her expression unreadable. "This is poison. Mr. Mariani, you're handing me a snake, and you're telling me not to get bit." "We're only giving you a piece of it," Rocco said. He was restless, pacing the small room. "The part that links Graymar to the inland shell companies. Nothing that traces back to us, or to the components. I want the district attorney of this county," he tapped her desk, "to open an investigation. Not the feds, not the Port Aurora police, who are all on the mayor's payroll." "An anonymous tip," Delaney added, her voice firm. She had not slept, but the fear had been baked into a cold, hard resolve. Just enough to get a warrant, just enough to light the first match. Eliza Kahn looked at Delaney, a long, assessing stare. "You're the nurse, the one who stitched him up." She nodded, a decision made. "All right, one match, but the whole forest will burn." While Eliza planted the seed of the law, Rocco tended his own garden. He met with 3 men, captains of small, independent tugs and fishing boats, in the back room of a chandlery. They were men he had known his whole life, men who owed him money, men who feared him. "You're in my debt," Rocco said, his voice quiet, laying 3 files on the table. "You, Pappy, your fuel bill is $90,000. You, Miguel, your son's gambling. And you, Sven, your new engine." The men stared at the floor. "Graymar and an ICIB deputy named Kellen have been squeezing you," Rocco continued. "Protection fees, docking fines, I know, because you've been paying them by shorting me." "We had no choice, Rocco," Pappy whispered. "I'm giving you one." He slid 3 new, clean sheets of paper across the table. "Affidavits. You sign this, attesting to the extortion. You state the dates, the amounts, and Kellen's name. You sign it, and you get it notarized." "He'll kill us," Sven said, his face pale. "I will," Rocco said. "If you don't, but if you do, your debt is gone." He took a lighter from his pocket and held it over the 3 files. 90,000, Pappy, gone. All of it. All you have to do is tell the truth. At the docklight, Delaney was prepping for a charity music night. Mr. Latham loved the idea, especially when Delaney suggested all proceeds go to the mayor's pet project. The Lighthouse Fund. "It's just so wonderful, you giving back," Latham gushed, his eyes a little too bright. "We all have to do our part," Delaney said, her smile aching. Sarah's team had done a silent sweep last night. They'd found 3 bugs, one under the bar, one in the office, and one, disgustingly, in the women's restroom. Latham was Graymar's man, through and through. The trap was simple. Sarah had provided a high-fidelity recorder, no bigger than a pen. Delaney would confess her worry about the night's earnings, wondering aloud to Latham if it was safe to hold so much cash, given all the strange people, like those men in suits who had been asking about Rocco Mariani. She would feed him lines, get him to admit his connection, get him to confirm he was watching for Graymar. The night before the fundraiser, her phone rang. It was Pastor Ray, her voice calm, but with an underlying urgency. "Delaney, you should come. Not to see him, just to see—" At the church, Ray led her to a small utility room. On a table sat a brown teddy bear. "It was in the donation box this morning," Ray said. "A gift for the children." She turned the bear over. Stitched into its back, almost invisible, was a tiny, black fisheye lens. "Evan found it," Ray said, her voice steel. "He thought the eye was weird. He brought it to me. I had already moved him. Delaney. He was never in the room with this. He was never in danger. But they got inside." Delaney looked at the small, glass eye. They had put a spy in a church, aimed at her son. The City Hall fundraiser for the Lighthouse Fund was the social event of the season. The mayor was there, his teeth bright. The chief of police was there. Agent Kellen, in a sharp, dark suit, was standing by the door, a picture of federal integrity. Delaney was invisible. She wore a dark blue catering uniform, her hair pulled back under a hat. She was just one of 20 staff members. She had one job. The presentation was in a ballroom, on a massive projection screen. The mayor's aide had the presentation on a laptop, queued up. Delaney, carrying a tray of champagne flutes, stumbled. The tray went flying, glasses and champagne showering the aide's table. "Oh, my God, I am so sorry, I am so sorry," Delaney cried, dabbing at the aide's jacket, her hands shaking. "You idiot," the aide hissed, grabbing napkins. While his eyes were on his ruined suit, Delaney's other hand was at his laptop. Her movements, hidden by the chaos, were fast. Her hand held a duplicate USB drive. 1 second, out, in. She was on her knees, mopping up glass, when the aide went back to the podium. "And now, a look at the good work our fund is doing." He clicked the remote. The screen lit up. It was not a picture of smiling children. It was the flow chart from Rocco's hard drive. It was the complex, damning web of shell companies, illegal transfers, and laundered money, with Graymar Transport at one end and the Lighthouse Fund at the other. A collective gasp went through the room. The mayor's face went from ruddy to sheet white. "Turn that off, turn that off." The aide was fumbling with the laptop, but the image was already seared into 100 phones. "It's a smear," the mayor shouted. "A technical error, a lie." Agent Kellen was already moving, his face a mask of thunder. "ICIB, this room is a federal matter," he yelled. "We are seizing that equipment. This is an attack on national security." His men, who had been waiting, swarmed the stage, not to investigate, but to confiscate. In the ensuing panic, as the city's elite scrambled, Delaney's phone buzzed. It was a link from an anonymous account. She clicked it. It was an audio file, now streaming on 3 different social media platforms. It was her voice, on the rooftop. "I don't know what you're talking about," and then Kellen's, "Money. A new life. We can put you and Evan," that's his name. "Right, Evan. All you have to do is tell me where Mariani's real ledger is." Rocco had just hit back. While Kellen was destroying one piece of evidence, Rocco had released another. Time to go. Sarah was at her elbow, materializing from nowhere, dressed as a security guard. She steered Delaney through a service door, into a concrete utility tunnel. As they emerged into the alley, they could hear shouting from the front of City Hall. Not from the guests, it was the people, the dock workers, The fishermen, Pappy and Sven and Miguel, and dozens of others. They had seen the post. They had heard the recording. They were chanting. Transparent, no more lies. Rocco Mariani was now the most wanted man in Oregon, a public target for both the feds he had exposed and the criminals he had double-crossed. That night, he met Delaney at the shipyard. He was wearing his father's old pea coat. "Eliza Kahn is filing the affidavits in the morning," he said, "and I'm going with her. I'm turning myself in to the neighboring county's DA, not as a criminal, as a witness." Delaney stared at him. "They'll arrest you." "Yes," he said, "and I will post bail, and I will fight them in a courtroom, not in the shadows. This is the only way, Delaney, to be clean." She wrestled with the impossible. She had just begun to know this man, had just allowed herself to feel, and now he was walking into a cage. How could she love a man who was choosing to leave her, to become a prisoner? She looked at his face, at the resolve in his eyes, and she understood. He was not surrendering. He was transforming. He was becoming the man his father would have been proud of, the man she could, impossibly, love. "Go," she said, her voice thick. "We'll be waiting." Later that night, on the burner phone she got a new message. It was a voice memo, just for her. She had to send it to Evan. She forwarded it to Pastor Ray's phone. 5 minutes later, Ray texted back, "He's listening. He's smiling." Delaney pressed play. Rocco's voice filled the small, cold room, not as a boss, not as a fighter, but as something else. "A lighthouse doesn't fight the storm. Evan," his voice rumbled, warm and steady. "It doesn't run. It doesn't hide. It just stands. It holds its ground, and it keeps its light on, and it shines brightest in the middle of the storm." It was a promise. He was coming back. The night before the hearing was still. Too still. Rocco was supposed to be in a safe house, preparing with Eliza Kahn. Delaney had made the impossible choice to bring Evan back to the lighthouse, just for one night. She had told herself it was so he could get his favorite books, but she knew she just needed to see him, to hold him in his own bed one last time before their world changed forever. She was packing a small go bag for him when the first window shattered. It was not a gunshot, it was a heavy, metallic thunk, followed by a dense, acrid hissing. A gray canister rolled across their living room floor, spewing thick, oily smoke. Before Delaney could even scream, another canister smashed through the kitchen window. "Mom," Evan cried from his room. The smoke was instantaneous, choking, stinging her eyes. "Get down," Delaney yelled. She grabbed a wet towel from the bathroom, shoved it over her face, and Army crawled to Evan's room. He was huddled by his bed, coughing, his eyes wide with terror. "Hold this," she commanded, pressing a wet washcloth to his face. "We're not using the door. We're going out the window like a game." She threw his small mattress onto the roof of the porch below his window, then bundled her 9-year-old son in her arms. "Hold on tight." She pushed the screen out and dropped onto the mattress, Evan clinging to her back like a limpet. The smoke was already pouring from the window behind them. "We go up," she said, her voice a strained rasp. She climbed the old, rickety trellis, her fingers digging into the wood, Evan's weight a terrifying, precious burden. They reached the flat part of the main roof just as the front door of the lighthouse was kicked open. Floodlights snapped on, bathing the building in a harsh, white glare. Below, she saw them. Not police, not ICE-IB, a dozen men in black, unmarked tactical gear, their faces hidden by masks, and leading them, his suit jacket flapping, his face contorted in a mask of rage, was Agent Kellen. "He's in there," Kellen roared. "Mariani, we have a federal warrant." "He's lying," Delaney whispered to Evan. "Keep your face covered." A black sedan screeched around the corner, its headlights cutting through the smoke. It slammed to a stop. Rocco and Sarah burst out. Rocco took in the scene in one split second, the smoke pouring from the windows. Kellen's fake squad, and Delaney, silhouetted on the roof with his son. "Sarah, the flank!" Rocco yelled. his voice a primal roar that cut through the chaos. He didn't run to the house. He ran for the piers. Up here, Kellen spotted them. Get them! Delaney ran, carrying Evan, scrambling over the peak of the roof and sliding down the other side, her jeans smoking from the friction of the shingles. She landed hard on the narrow pier that ran behind the house. Run! Ev, don't look back! They sprinted hand in hand down the splintered wood. Two of Kellen's men appeared at the end of the pier, blocking their escape. A brilliant red light exploded in their faces. Rocco had reached the emergency box on the main dock. He fired a signal flare. The burning, phosphoric light arched over their heads, bathing the entire dock in a hellish, sputtering red light, blinding Kellen's men. Now left, Rocco yelled. Delaney shoved Evan through a gap in the railing, onto a parallel walkway piled high with drying fishing nets. It was a maze of ropes, buoys, and coarse mesh. Lace your hands. Evan, crawl, don't get tangled. Another flare went up, this time a blinding white, turning the night to day. Delaney looked back. Rocco was 10 yards behind, walking backward, firing a pistol not at the men, but at the heavy-duty lights above them, showering the dock in sparks and darkness. Sarah was on the high ground, moving along the warehouse roofs, providing cover, but she was one person against a dozen. A third flare, fired by one of Kellen's men, missed Rocco and arced high, landing with a soft whoomph in the hold of a derelict wooden fishing boat tied to the pier. Dry, oil-soaked wood and old nets went up instantly. A wall of orange flame erupted, cutting the pier in two. Sarah, running to join them, was trapped on the other side. As she tried to leap a gap, her foot went through a rotten plank. Delaney heard her sharp cry of pain. Sarah was stuck, her leg wedged, and the fire was spreading. Delaney did not hesitate. Evan, get in that metal box and don't move. She shoved her son into an empty bait locker. She ran back toward the flames. Sarah, my leg, it's stuck. Go get the kid out. I'm not leaving you, Delaney pulled, but the wood had her. Move! Rocco was there. He put his shoulder against the pylon, his muscles straining, and roared as he snapped the rotted wood. He scooped Sarah up in a fireman's carry. The fire was roaring now, the heat blistering. The plank, he yelled. He carried Sarah across a single, narrow 12-inch plank that connected their pier to the main tugboat dock. Delaney grabbed Evan from the box. Evan, your light, your fog light, the one from your project. He was still clutching his backpack. It's here, he cried, his hands shaking as he pulled out the shoebox. Turn it on, point it at the water, blink it 3 short, 3 long. SOS, he whispered. Yes, do it now. As Delaney ran with him, he aimed the small, blinking red light into the darkness of the bay. Stop! Kellen was on the tugboat dock, flanked by 2 men. He raised his pistol. It's over! From the darkness of the bay, a deep, throaty horn answered. A massive, rusted black shape was moving toward them. A tugboat, the Aurora Queen, its deck lined with the dark shapes of men. The fishermen, Pappy and Sven and Miguel. They had seen the signal. Get off our dock! Fed... Pappy's voice boomed over a loudspeaker. The community was here. Kellen, enraged, his prey slipping away, fired, not at them, but at the piling next to them. I said stop. The bullet, a heavy .45 caliber, tore a chunk of wood from the thick pylon. A razor-sharp shard, a foot long, flew through the air. Rocco saw it. He moved. He threw himself in front of Delaney, his arm coming up. Delaney screamed. He grunted a sharp exhalation of pain as the wooden spike grazed his shoulder, tearing through his coat and shirt, drawing blood. He did not flinch. He just grabbed her and Evan, shoving them toward the tugboat's deck. Jump. Hands, calloused and strong, reached up from the tug. They pulled Evan, then Delaney, then Rocco aboard. Sarah was already being tended to. Kellen's men opened fire, but the tug's heavy steel hull was impervious. The boat's massive engine thrummed, and it pulled away, leaving Kellen screaming in a circle of firelight. Delaney stood on the deck, shaking, holding Evan. She looked back. The lighthouse. her home. The only home Evan had ever known was engulfed in smoke. Flames now licking at the roof she had just climbed. It was gone. Everything was gone. Rocco came to her side, his hand pressed to his bleeding shoulder. He was staring at the shore, but not at the fire. He was watching Kellen. "He knew," Rocco whispered, his voice hoarse. "He knew you'd bring Evan back there. He knew the layout." "Rocco, how?" Delaney asked. "The only people who knew the layout of that house, who knew the back pier, who knew Evan was there, were my inner circle." He was sheet white, not from blood loss, but from a dawning, sickening realization. The medical shipments, the lighthouse fund, the timing, Maris. "Your cousin," Delaney whispered, horrified. He closed his eyes. The betrayal hit him harder than the shrapnel. "Maris Mariani, my own blood. She's the one who runs the medical freight. She's the only one who could have set this up." He looked utterly broken, a man whose foundations had been ripped away. Delaney put her free hand on his arm, her fingers gripping his bicep, her own fear momentarily forgotten. She held him, her small frame a pillar against his. "Endings don't come from blood. Rocco," she said, her voice fierce and low, her words a new vow. "They come from choice. You choose who you are. Now, so do we." Rocco looked at her, his eyes finding hers in the firelight. He nodded, the fire hardening in his gaze. He looked at Pappy at the wheel. "Take us to Gravel Bay," he commanded. Pappy turned, his eyes wide. "Rocco, the tide's going out. It's a graveyard. We'll be trapped." "I know," Rocco said, his bloody hand closing over Delaney's. "So will they. Graymar is weak. They'll follow us in, but they don't know the water. We're ending this where only the locals can walk." Gravel Bay was a skeleton. The rusted hulls of forgotten ships jutted from the slick. Black mud, their masts like the ribs of long-dead monsters. The tide was pulling out, a relentless sucking sound that revealed the bay's treacherous, unnavigable floor. Pappy kept the tug at the bay's entrance, in the only deep channel left. "He'll follow us," Rocco said, staring into the dark maze. "He will," Delaney said, her voice quiet but carrying. She was standing at a nautical chart spread on the tug's greasy console. "And he'll think we're trapped, but he's the one who will be—" She pointed to the chart. "My nursing clinicals taught me how to read AFib and trauma. My whole life in this port taught me how to read this." Her finger traced a line on the chart. "Kellen is arrogant. He thinks he has the bigger boat, more men. He'll follow us in. But the tide is dropping fast. In 1 hour, this channel," she tapped the chart, "will be 3 feet of mud. His deep draft ICIB boats will be stranded. Our tug has a flat bottom. We can sit on the mud and be fine. He'll be a sitting duck." "The reverse tide," Rocco murmured, a dark appreciation in his eyes. "You're stranding him." "We're unmasking him," she corrected, her voice steel. While Delaney planned the battlefield, Rocco gathered the army, not his enforcers. He used the ship-to-shore radio, calling in favors from men who had not spoken to him in years, the old guard, the mechanics, the welders, the engineers that Graymar had retired to make way for their own crews. "I am not asking you to fight," Rocco's voice crackled over the radio, his voice carrying to a dozen small, lamp-lit cabins. "I'm asking you to bear witness. Graymar and a corrupt Fed named Kellen tried to burn Delaney Shore and her boy out of the lighthouse tonight. They are coming to kill us now, in this bay. I am asking you to turn on your lights, to get in your boats, and to watch. We don't want blood. We want justice." In the tug's cabin, Sarah, her arm in a fresh sling, was setting up a data hub. "I'm routing a multi-source stream," she explained, her fingers flying over a keyboard. 4 different cell networks, 2 satellite uplinks. They can cut 1. They might even cut 2. They can't cut all 6. The second Kellen's men are in the bay, we go live. On her own phone, Delaney messaged Pastor Ray. "Gravel Bay, now. Tell the parents. We need civilian witnesses. We need good people to watch the bad." The reply was immediate. "They are already on their way." The tug's cabin was quiet for a moment. The only sound, the thrum of the engine and the drip of water. Rocco sat on a bench, his face pale. The bleeding in his shoulder had started again. Delaney saw it. She fetched the medical kit, the one she had used on him in the shipyard. She knelt in front of him, cutting away the ruined, bloody fabric. "You're no good to me dead, Mariani," she said, her voice soft. He watched her as she cleaned the wound, her touch firm and practiced. "You're always patching me up, Delaney Shore." "It's getting to be a bad habit," she whispered. She worked in silence, applying a new, thick pressure bandage. When she was done, her hands lingered, her palms resting on his shoulders. She looked him in the eyes. "When this is over, when Kellen is in cuffs, and the cameras are off, I need a promise." "Anything," Wang, he said, his voice raw. "You're full of rage, for your father, for Maris, for the lighthouse. I feel it. It's hot enough to burn down the whole world." She leaned closer. "You promise me you will live for us, not for revenge. You promise me you're done being the man your father died running from." Rocco looked past her, to the bow of the tug. Evan's shoebox fog light, which he'd grabbed from his backpack, was wired to the tug's battery, its little red light blinking steadily, a tiny, defiant beacon. He covered her hands with his. "I swear on that light," he said, his voice thick. "I swear on your son. Family first, power second, from now on." As if summoned by the vow, his satellite phone rang, its harsh digital chirp slicing the night. Sarah looked at the number. "It's her. It's Maris." Rocco's face hardened. He looked at Delaney, at Sarah, at Pappy. He did not take the call. He pressed the answer button, then hit speaker. The entire cabin filled with the sound of a woman weeping. Rocco, are you there?" "We're all here. Maris," Rocco said, his voice cold iron. "Me, Sarah, Pappy, and Delaney Shore, the woman you just tried to have burned alive with her son." A sharp, horrified gasp. No, I swear, I didn't know about the fire. Kellen, he said it was just a warning, just to get you to back off." "Why, Maris?" Rocco's voice was broken. "My own blood. Why?" His little girl." Maris sobbed, the words tumbling out. "My daughter, her medical bills. She's at a special clinic in Seattle. It's $200,000 a year. Graymar. They paid for it. They found out I was skimming the medical manifests. They've been holding it over me. They said if I didn't tell them where you were, they'd pull her funding. She would die." "Rocco, don't you see she's my child?" The cabin was silent, the woman's desperate sobs the only sound. Delaney stepped forward, looking at the speakerphone as if it were a patient. "Maris," she said, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the weeping. "What's the name of the clinic? What's the name of the fund you're paying into?" Maris, startled, told her. Delaney looked at Rocco. "A Port Community Fund. We can set it up. With Eliza, Pappy, Sven, Miguel, all the others. We can pay that bill. We can take away their leverage. Right now." Rocco stared at her, the idea blooming, not revenge, a rescue. He nodded at Pappy. "Call the others. We're starting a new fund. Tonight." A low-frequency thrum vibrated through the hull. Pappy pointed into the darkness. "They're here." 2 sleek, black ICIB pursuit boats were entering the mouth of the bay. They were running dark, but their engines were loud. Rocco's phone, still on speaker, crackled. "You're a fool. Mariani." It was Kellen's voice. He must have taken the phone from Maris. "I'm coming for you, and I'm going to burn this entire graveyard to the water. With you in it, it'll be a tragic accident. All that spilled fuel in the mud. So dangerous." He knew, and he was planning to set the bay on fire. Kellen hung up. Delaney's head snapped up. She sniffed the air. The wind, which had been coming from the east, was shifting. "The wind," she said, her voice urgent. "It's turning. He'll light the fuel, and the wind will blow the fire right at us." "We're trapped," Sarah said, her face pale. "No, we're not." Delaney grabbed Rocco's arm. "At Old Cannery, on the North Shore. Those huge industrial fans they used to use in the drying rooms. Are they still there?" Yes, Rocco said, the new plan forming in his eyes. They're rusted, but the motors are sealed. Sarah, Rocco commanded, his voice alive again. Go live. Go live now. Patch Kellen's last transmission through. Let the world hear him threaten to burn us. Pappy, get us to the cannery, Delaney. You're a genius. They chugged toward the shore, a new target in mind. They beached the tug against the rotting pier of the old cannery, just as Kellen's boats rounded the bend. Pappy pointed to the channel's end, where a massive, rusted anchor, half buried in the mud, marked the shallows. Shark's Jaw, he said. The only way out, and the tide's almost gone. The trap was set. The fire was coming. The final move was not yet made. Kellen was on the deck of the beached tug, his face streaked with soot and madness. He had Delaney. His arm was locked around her throat, the muzzle of his pistol pressed hard against her temple. The mudflats were lit by the growing orange glow of the first small fires he had set. Rocco stood 20 feet away, on the rotting cannery pier, his own pistol in his hand, but he could not raise it. His hand, the one that had never wavered, was trembling. His eyes were red, locked on Delaney's, and filled with a raw, agonizing terror. His love for her, the thing that had given him a reason to fight, had just become his single greatest weakness. He was paralyzed. "Drop it, Mariani," Kellen screamed, his voice cracking. "Drop it, or I'll scatter her brains all over this rust bucket, all of you. Shut down that stupid live stream." Sarah, Pappy, and the others were frozen. The live stream, however, was still running, its multiple feeds capturing the high-definition standoff. Delaney's eyes were locked on Rocco's. She was terrified, but she was not broken. She was a nurse. She was a mother, she was a tactician. Her left hand, which Kellen had not secured, was dangling near her waist. Slowly, deliberately, her fingers moved. She held up 3 fingers, then 2, then 1. It was the countdown game she played with Evan, the rocket launch signal he had invented. Rocco saw it. His eyes, for a split second, widened in comprehension. She was giving him a signal, not of surrender, of action. "Wind," she choked out, her voice a strangled gasp. "Changes. In 1. Rocco did not hesitate. He roared, not in surrender, but in command. "Now, Pappy." Pappy slammed his fist against a heavy, ancient breaker switch on the cannery wall. With a groan of rusted metal and a shower of sparks, the 3 massive, 10-foot diameter industrial fans inside the cannery drying room roared to life. The wind, which had been gently blowing the acrid smoke toward them, was suddenly reversed. The fans created a hurricane, a massive, focused blast of air that hit the pier like a physical wall. The thick, oily smoke from Kellen's fires was instantly sucked backward, enveloping him in a choking, blinding cloud. Kellen roared, confused and blind, his grip on Delaney faltering for a single second as he coughed. It was all Rocco needed. He did not fire his gun. He dropped it. He launched himself across the gap, unarmed, a pure, kinetic expression of will. He hit Kellen with the force of a battering ram. It was not a fight. It was a collision. The 2 men and Delaney tumbled onto the wet steel deck. Kellen's pistol went skittering, sliding across the wet metal and disappearing into the dark, oily mud below. Rocco was pure, cold rage. He had Kellen pinned, his hands on the agent's throat, his knuckles white. "No!" Delaney screamed, pulling at his arm, the same arm she had bandaged. "Rocco, no, we do this with the light, remember. We choose the light." His eyes, blazing with hate, met hers. He saw her. He saw the fire, the smoke, and the woman he loved. The killing rage receded, replaced by the man who had made a promise. He loosened his grip. In that instant, Sarah was there. She kicked Kellen's arm hard and cinched a heavy-duty plastic cuff around his wrist, attaching him to a railing. "The stream is still live. Agent," Sarah said, her voice dripping ice as she held up her phone, its camera capturing his defeat. "Smile for the world." The feed was everywhere. the fake unmarked ICIB badge, the audio of his threat to burn the bay, the video of him holding a civilian hostage, the feed, which Sarah had been piping to every news outlet in the state, had become an avalanche. The port community, the parents from Evan's school, the tugboat captains, they were all sharing, commenting, demanding. A phone rang. It was Maris calling Sarah. "He's cuffed," Sarah said. I did it." Maris's voice was shaking, but strong. "I called the state police, and I have the code for Graymar's safe, the one in the empty medical container at berth 7. The black ledger, when it was finally opened an hour later, was the final nail. Pastor Ray and a line of parents stood at the entrance to Gravel Bay, a human chain, a silent, powerful line of witnesses. They had made a corridor, shielding Evan and the other children who had come, keeping them from the chaos, but allowing them to see the victory. As the sun began to bleed gray light into the sky, the first sirens were heard. Not ICB, this time. It was the local fire department, their lights flashing, their path no longer blocked. They doused the last of Kellen's small fires. The shipyard and the men in it were safe. They were followed by the state police and the district attorney from the neighboring county. They did not come for Rocco. They came for Kellen, who was read his rights as the live stream recorded his stony, defeated face. The TRAT, when it was signed, was for both Kellen and the CEO of Graymar Transport, the Port Aurora ICIB office. It was announced, was being dissolved, pending a federal investigation. Rocco watched them lead Kellen away. He was covered in mud and soot, his shoulder bleeding. He turned to the DA. "I'm next," he said. "Mr. Mariani," the DA said, "your lawyer has been very persuasive." Rocco did present himself. He answered for his old world, for the protection rackets and the shadow deals. But in light of his cooperation, in light of the new, legitimate shipping contracts he had filed, and in light of him being the man who unmasked a federal conspiracy, he was given leniency. He walked away from the courthouse a free man, his past paid for. He walked straight to Delaney, who was waiting on the steps. He looked at her, his eyes wet, the tough, hard shell of the mafia boss gone, replaced by the man who had kept his promise. "We chose the light," he whispered. They did not go back to the lighthouse. It was gone. Instead, the port community held a small ceremony on the main pier. Evan, his face bright, stood next to a new, smaller version of his fog light, rebuilt from the parts he had saved in his backpack. He plugged it in, and its small, steady red beam cut through the evening fog. Rocco turned to Delaney. He did not kiss her with the desperation of the shipyard. He kissed her with the promise of a future. He put his hands on her cheeks, his forehead resting against hers, a slow, deep, and gentle press of lips that tasted of salt, survival, and home. "Home," he murmured, "is right here." The docklight reopened 3 months later, not as a bar, but as a community co-op, owned by the bartenders and the fishermen. A new fund, the real Port Aurora Lighthouse Fund, was established by the community. Its first act was to grant a full nursing scholarship to Delaney Shore. Rocco's new company, Mariani Transparent Logistics, had half the ships, but twice the business, and Sarah Vale, finding she was better at protecting than intimidating, was hired as the new head of Port Community Security. The final shot was of the real Port Aurora Lighthouse, its powerful white beam cutting through the darkness, sweeping across the water. "The day she saved a drunk mafia boss," a voice said, "she never imagined she was also saving a harbor, and her own heart." Thank you so much for listening to this story. We'd love to know where you're listening from, so please share your thoughts and where you are in the comments below. We love to connect. Please subscribe to our channel, Mafia Boss Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting that hype button so more people can hear this story.